Welcome into another episode of Behind the Wheel, brought to you by Bobby Rail Honda of State College. We're in one of their beautiful Honda Pilots. Once again, I am joined by Lions 24/7, Tyler Donohue. Tyler, what's up, brother?
So, always a pleasure. We're kind of a frequent flyer now in your car, and I'm enjoying it. It's a good time.
We always have fun riding around State College. I think it's a unique way to do it, and it's a good way to talk a little bit of Penn State head coach search. So let's dive into it. You guys over at Lions 24/7, absolutely killing it, best in the business. Make sure you guys go subscribe, get on Lions 24/7, the website, get all the updates, all that good stuff. You just want to plug exactly the...
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, but didn't we just have this conversation 3 or 4 weeks ago? It's still going. It might have a couple more weeks left at least. But yeah, we'd love to have you part of the conversation. Our hot board and the accompanying thread are over 3 million views at this point. We're over 45,000 comments, I think. So it's been a lot of dialogue. You're welcome to join it. We have a 30% off deal going on right now for an annual subscription. If you want to just take a look for 1 month and maybe just ride out this coaching search and see where you stand after that, you will pay full price for 1 month, but you will automatically get a good perk, access to Paramount Plus. So we have a great partnership with CBS, our overlords at Paramount, and so we got some perks to offer, and there's my spiel. We can get into whatever you want now.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. Make sure you guys go check them out. All right, right now where we sit is what are the most consistent names that are names that you are continuing to hear? We are just a month and a day out as we record this from the James Franklin firing. What are the names that were popping up at the beginning and the names that are still occurring in the conversations you're having?
Yeah, at the beginning and that was toward when we had our last conversation in the car with you. Matt Rule was a popular name. I think we can cross that off the list. He had a really rough loss at Minnesota. Obviously, Nebraska decided they wanted to extend his contract. And I think right now you kind of look at some of those similar names that were there, but we wondered how it would go for them in October and November, and we have some answers. Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, they got hot. They beat a bunch of ranked teams. They're number 4 in the country right now. They look like they're going to be a presence in the championship chase. That's one where I think maybe there was some belief early on that he could get run out of town or he could feel uncomfortable in town. That ain't happening based on the trajectory they have down there. I think that's a name that's really cooled off generally if you kind of had a pie-in-the-sky name. But another one of those big swing names that's been there since the beginning, it feels like, is Mike Elko down at Texas A&M. They also have stayed hot. They're 9-0. They're doing things that the program hasn't done down there in more than 30 years, and yet there's still persistent noise about Mike Elko's name here in State College. My impression has been since the beginning, they want to force him to say definitively no. Get away from me. I don't want the Nittany Lions job. What I've gathered so far is maybe that has not happened yet. And so until that happens, the one thing I have, the caveat here is, how does this work? What is the logistical process of adding somebody or really trying to make the pitch to add somebody who's gearing up for a playoff run with their current squad? Not only does he have the SEC championship game potentially in front of him, but you got at least one playoff game beyond that. Texas A&M is well positioned to maybe be a bye week team. So then you're talking about getting into January, and ultimately it's hard to see. I mean, give Pat Kraft all the credit in the world if he's able to get a playoff-bound coach to come here to Penn State, but it's hard for me to see someone walking away from the program that they have already invested that equity in, and they have ready to go in the playoffs, maybe win a national championship or at least compete for one, and with deep pockets like the ones that exist at Alabama and Texas A&M, of course. That's a really difficult combination to get over. And I think so that's where I redirect a little bit. And the name that I think has been most widespread for me, and a lot of my conversations, Landon, some of them are certainly here locally, but I've really leaned into talking to people at the regional level, the national level, on a variety of different campuses. I think that's very important because sometimes you're in the bubble here, and things are echoing around you. And Eli Drinkwitz has been the name really for 4 weeks now that has been the most consistent. That's going out to Columbia, Missouri. That's here in Happy Valley. That's talking to people at the agent level. And that has kind of maybe elevated a little bit in the last few days. I've been told for a while regarding Drinkwitz, if they get to a third loss, that's when the ball could really start rolling, because then they're out of the playoff equation. And when we were in this car last and talking about this search, I believe Missouri was 5-1, and they were looking like they could be a college football threat. Bo Beulah had it rolling. Their only loss at that point, I think, was 3 points to Alabama, which is a good loss. They since have lost Beulah to an injury. That they fell against Vanderbilt, and they lost last week against Texas A&M and the Fighting Mike Elkos. And so now 3 losses is there as of Saturday, and I think the pressure is starting to intensify where both of those parties, Missouri's university and athletic department, and also Eli Drinkwitz, they got to figure out what's next. Are they going to be intertwined here with the lucrative contract extension and maybe getting more NIL dollars to pay for his roster? Or is this a situation where Drinkwitz is going to peer toward that exit door? And what I've been told is he's a top 3 to 5 candidate for the Florida job. He's a top 3 to 5 candidate for the Auburn job. I've been told to keep an eye on LSU, depending on how that search develops. But what I've also been told is that Penn State, as of about 48 hours ago when I had a pretty significant conversation, is likely the most well-positioned program to take him from Missouri. And so where we sit here, and I have been very honest with our board, and I've been honest with you, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I think it's been proven to be that. I still don't think we'll have any clarity until close to Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. But as things stand now, Eli Drinkwitz, based on the widespread conversations I've had, and not just kind of tunnel vision conversations I've had here, he's the one that keeps popping up. But I don't think it's a done deal with anybody, and I think there is certainly conversations that Pat Kraft is engaged in at the same time. I don't think he's narrowing it to one person. I think there has been a narrowed and intensified focus this week, it feels like, but I don't believe that it's one guy that he's glued in on. I think there's probably 2, maybe 3 conversations happening where you're trying to get guys close to feeling very comfortable about the contract situation, about all the different ramifications that go into changing a job, and what you want from your staff, what you want from your NIL opportunities, your recruiting opportunities, who's maybe going to get retained, who they don't want retained, all those conversations to get hammered out. I think they're happening with multiple coaches right now. And, Eli Drinkwitz, though, is where I would probably lean toward right now. That could change as soon as I get out of this car and get on my phone.
I know it fluctuates every 5 seconds. I want to go back to the college football playoff conversation, especially with Elko. Do you think that's something that Penn State could do? I mean, you did it with Bill O'Brien. Now, that was the Super Bowl. Could we be the first people to have someone say, hey, I'm going to come coach Penn State, but I'm going to try to go win a college football playoff first, and actually announce it and put that out there? It almost feels kind of like season suicide if you're telling your team, though, I'm out no matter what when this season ends. I mean, is that something Pat Kraft would do you think?
Well, I think, one, there's a couple things here. From an agent perspective, why would you encourage your client to make any decision when you're on the verge of a playoff run? Wouldn't you want to see how that playoff run goes? Bet on yourself, because you win a couple games in the playoffs, you get to a national championship game, you finish the season with the trophy. That's all the leverage anyone could ever want in any conversation to be a college football coach. Additionally, there's a third party involved here. It's not just Penn State and the coach and his agent. There's also his current employer. How would a school like Texas A&M react to a proposal that says, hey guys, it's been fun here. I know we're 12-0 and we're about to go play in the SEC championship game, but I'm ready to sign with Penn State. I'm going to see it through here. We'll see how it goes the rest of the way, but I'm going to start really assembling my future plans in Happy Valley. Well, there's a few things to that. One, like you said, how does the locker room react? How does the entire program react to that, knowing they have a lame duck coach all of a sudden, going from an exuberant situation to kind of a waiting period all of a sudden? Additionally, you've got the transfer portal that's going to be opening up in January. That's going to affect teams that are in the playoff. Like we saw last year with a guy like Bo Prabula leaving. If you know your head coach is on the way out the door, why wouldn't you consider sticking your foot out that door too? And so I don't know what the case that could be laid by a guy like Pat Kraft to encourage someone to actually take that step. It's going to happen eventually, I'd imagine, in college football. My read would be that it's more likely to happen with like a really hot group of 5 coach than someone who's in the mix to win an SEC championship. I know people, are probably clinging to the belief that Penn State can make this happen, but I think when you start to sort through things logistically, from Penn State's point of view, is one thing, but you have to consider what an agent is going to be compelled to have his client do, and what the employer, whether it's the university president, the athletic director, and that locker room that the coach has to go and look at every single day for the rest of his time there. There's a lot of factors that I think work against you in bringing in a coach who is actively involved in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be hard, because I feel like you said, you're ruining that season. Do you think that Kraft would wait though? Let's say that you're not going to get an official announcement, and it's like, hey, I'm probably going to sign, and you can't get anything in writing or for sure if you're Pat Kraft. I don't know, from your view and people you're talking to, can Penn State wait and try to bet on the fact that they could get someone in January, especially with what most are assuming this could be a 40, 50 plus transfer portal roster in 2026?
I don't know, Landon. What are your thoughts on handshake agreements between college football agents and athletic directors? How do you feel about those?
Not very good.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And so if you're saying, hey, we're not going to have a head coach in place for the early signing period. We're going to have potentially James Franklin get hired somewhere, in December, and then have a lot of players peering towards that campus as a potential landing spot for themselves. And yet your athletic director says, hold on a moment. We got a big surprise for you. It's coming, I promise. That's tough. So I don't know how you can go through this where it's not a public conversation, where it's a confirmed incoming head coach. I've heard some people being like, well, they can assemble kind of a shadow staff of support staff analysts. You can have as many analysts as possible. Can you hire a bunch of analysts on this guy's behalf? I don't know how that works, and I don't know if that can work. And honestly, I just think it's a really difficult thing. Because we haven't seen it, there's no blueprint for this. And anyone that says, well, just throw a pile of money at them, do you not think they can do that at Texas A&M? Do you not think they can do that at Alabama? Again, if we're talking about a group of 5 coach here, and he's got his school in a great position, but he's probably aware it's going to be hard to duplicate the next year. Penn State can pay him maybe 3 times his salary, and they can give him remarkable roster opportunities that he's never going to have on his current campus. That's one selling point that I think can tip the scales and get a guy to walk away. I just really have a hard time, and if he can do it, Pat Kraft deserves every accolade that he's going to get. But I just really think that while there are those ongoing conversations with coaches who are in this situation, I just don't know how fruitful they're going to prove. But I appreciate him doing his diligence. I appreciate Penn State doing their diligence. But I think anyone kind of wrapping their arms around and saying this is how it's going to work out, we're going to pry away a coach from a college football playoff contender because point A, point B, point C, well, you've got a lot of other points to consider on that other campus right now. And I think it's really difficult. Unless a coach really is disgruntled with his current employer, with his current situation, if the family hates where he lives, maybe that's something that we don't know. Those are dynamics that are really hard for us to understand right now. But it's a tough sell. I think no matter how much money you want him to put on the table, no matter how much you want to, pump up how much money you're going to spend for your roster down the road, to get someone to walk away from their locker room in this situation, or to convince another university to be okay with this in-between moment as they could suffer short-term and long-term ramifications for this. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, and now you mentioned, the fact that people are saying, well, Texas A&M has unlimited money, and this last kind of piece I want to touch on with Elko is there a reason why he hasn't signed yet? It seems like A&M would want to get him signed in the midst of an undefeated season. Mm-hmm. Like you said, deep in the playoffs, SEC champs possibility there. Is there anything you're hearing on that front as to why he's kind of waiting?
Remember what I said about maybe a client or maybe an agent saying, why don't we wait till see how this playoff run goes? Why don't we collect everything, get it all on the table? I think that's part of it. I don't think this is something where Texas A&M is hesitant. Also, same with Drinkwitz at Missouri. I think if Missouri and Texas A&M had their way, there probably would be extensions announced right now. That's kind of my read on it. I don't know that for certain, but based on some conversations I've had with people on those campuses, based on, I think, just understanding how the agency world works with hot commodities. Lane Kiffin hasn't signed his extension yet either. I just think when you are being mentioned as a candidate for multiple jobs or a job that can make you the highest paid college football coach in history, if you can probably bet on yourself. If you feel good about getting through the next couple games, or why don't you just get through this next Saturday? The offer's not going to go anywhere. You win this Saturday, it's not going anywhere. You lose this Saturday, it's probably not going anywhere. So unless you feel like, you're going to die of a heart attack tomorrow and you want to get your family, get all the benefits from this contract before you die, I think it makes a lot of sense when you're in that power position to say, well, how much more can we put on the table here from other teams, from this school? I think it makes a lot of sense why you haven't heard some of these extensions yet.
Yeah, everybody's got the same agent, essentially. Our boy Jimmy Sexton is working all angles. There's nothing that anybody can do about it, but it's crazy that you can almost have, between Jimmy Sexton and then Trace Armstrong, it's like there's a monopoly on all these head coaches in college football, and you can just leverage jobs against each other, and I mean, it really is amazing.
They're playing their own game of musical chairs behind the scenes, aren't they?
Right, it really is. It's spectacular. Talking to all these different people, we're talking about these other jobs that are open, especially for Drinkwitz, or he could go elsewhere in the SEC. Do you and most people still view Penn State as the best job with everything going on with LSU, and they got the government and senators involved, and it's just, it's a crapshoot over there. Is this still, because obviously Penn State was the first major job, and I think the first job open this season. I don't know. Was that a good thing? Are we still the best job? Does Florida Auburn take over that title?
I think in a vacuum, if you just put like the brand logos up on a board and talk about where the recruiting territory is, you could certainly say, well, Florida and LSU are better jobs. They've won national championships, multiple national championships in recent years. And for Florida, you got to go back a little bit longer, but LSU's done it with multiple coaches. And you think about the recruiting territory that they're able to tap into that's more regional to them. It's more consistent, and it's more consistently loaded with some of this blue chip talent. But we're not talking about within a vacuum. You're right. There are real leadership problems that you can point to at certainly at LSU. When you've got a governor in a press conference basically saying he's going to dictate the coaching search, yeah, I'm going to steer clear of that one if I can. No. And now they're going after Brian Kelly for his money. I mean, there's things there that I think you gotta be very concerned about, or at least you want to get some details on if you're going to take a head coach job at LSU. You really want to know what that leadership structure looks like. You want to know who ultimately is responsible for your job security, and I think that's a big gray area right now. And there's similar stuff happening at Florida. They thought they had a new athletic director. He ended up getting run out of town before he gets settled into town, and they might have a lame duck situation. It certainly seems in their leadership situation. And Florida's also a place where, I mean, who has gone and taken a job at Florida lately where they left campus in a better spot as a coaching candidate than they went there? It's been a while. I mean, Will Muschamp took over that job, and he left with kind of a stink on him. Dan Mullen was a golden boy at Mississippi State during the Dak Prescott era. Doesn't look so hot coming out of Florida. McElwain, he was supposed to be a rising guy. He hasn't really resurfaced at the Power Conference level, and so I think that's something to look at as well. If you're going to be a coach and you're going to hitch your wagon to a brand, it's one thing where you can say, oh, in the last 30 years, there's been this, that, and the other thing that have been positive, but what is more recent history saying? What are the words out of the mouths of the current leaders who are going to make decisions that are going to impact your day-to-day ability to build a championship contender, your day-to-day ability to go home and tell your wife that my job is safe and we're here for the long term? I think Penn State right now, although they just fired their coach, before everybody else, this is a place that has shown patience. And this is an athletic director in Pat Kraft who's not going anywhere unless he wants to, or unless he screws up this hire maybe. So I think that you really have a stable situation. James Franklin himself, I mean, Pat Kraft can go sit with a candidate and say, here's 10 different times in the last 18 months where James Franklin publicly lauded our leadership alignment. This is where the head coach of the football program is saying, I have everything I need from the president of this university, from the athletic director of this university. And maybe in retrospect, James Franklin doesn't feel so hot about that now, but he told us time and time again that this was the alignment he was looking for throughout a decade on campus. And the last couple of years, it was there for him. So I think that's a major selling point. The words of your latest head coach about this athletic director, this university president, I think that can play a lot. And so to me, all things considered, and what I have come to understand about where Penn State is financially and what they're willing to invest, not just in the next head coach and his staff, but in the roster, which is so important for any coach now, I would say they are the top job on the market. I would still probably stick with that.
Now, a name that was really hot for a while.
I have one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a nine game SEC schedule moving forward. And I have heard that coaches are not excited about that. It's going to get more difficult to go to the playoff. I'm not saying that the Big Ten is some kind of cakewalk. I have a ton of respect for the Big Ten. But I think there is kind of a sentiment growing among the coaching community that your path may be a little bit more manageable to get to the playoff in this conference. And James Franklin said it time and time again, after that Auburn series ended, he was asked, do you want to do another series like this? And he's like, no, we're good. Like, we just want to rack up 3 wins in non-conference play if we can avoid headaches doing it. And you can make a counter argument that maybe that didn't suit them so well this year. Maybe they needed a bigger test. But Franklin was very adamant about, we got to get to 10, 11 wins. We've got to just get to the dance and give ourselves a chance. And so I think right now in the coaching culture, the coaching community, it's being viewed as there's more hurdle presented in the SEC when they add that next conference game. I know Big Ten's been at 9, but the SEC hasn't, and so that's going to change the dynamics a little bit down south.
Yeah, now one of the only, I think, non-head coaches that's really been in the mix for a while is Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline. That name was really hot for a while. Yeah. Has that cooled off a little bit from everything you're hearing?
I think it was hot for a while because people realized there was something to it. It wasn't just like getting thrown at the wall. There's definitely something to that. Brian Hartline, Penn State some level of reciprocated interest, okay? And of course, he got the chance to lead his offense against Penn State, and that passing game had more touchdown throws than it did incompletions that day. So that looks pretty good. But at the end of the day, I think what has become increasingly clear and crystallized is that Penn State desires a current sitting head coach, someone who has the experience of what it's like to manage 100+ guys on the roster, their parents, their families, the coaching staff that you have to be accountable for, all the different things that you need to do outside your position room, outside of an offensive meeting room that Brian Hartline, just to no fault of his own, has not taken on yet. And I think that it makes a lot of sense that they would kind of favor some of these other names, especially some of those that we've already discussed who've done it at the highest level of some big time conferences. But I don't think he's a name that you just go and cross off your list right now. I think that maybe they'd have to get some significant no's, where we're in a situation where Brian Hartline is really at the bargaining table and hammering out a contract with Penn State. But I also understand that it may just be a matter of time before he's somebody's head coach. And do you want to be the team that watches him become this next coordinator to head coach home run, who's recruiting guys out of Pennsylvania and recruiting guys out of your footprint and maybe going head to head with you for another Big Ten team down the road? Is that something that you're going to be able to stomach later? Obviously, you can't have everybody. I think they're going to be happy, Penn State, with who they ultimately get here. I'd say right now that there's probably 5 or 6 guys on their list where if they end up with one of them, they're going to feel like this search was a success. I don't know if Hartline is cemented on that list, but I don't think he's a guy that we can certainly shove off completely to the side. I just feel like there's a prioritization right now. There's a bit of a ladder. And if you're a current head coach who's been doing that for years with multiple programs perhaps, I think Penn State's going to be leaning more in your direction in terms of motivation to get this done.
Is there anyone out there that is a Brian Kelly from Notre Dame to LSU type? And when I say that, I mean could come just out of nowhere, that is somewhere else that you could just feel just pop up and could be a factor in this recruiting search? Is there, a Brian DeVol that is now come free for the New York Giants? Yeah. I know everybody kind of laughs at that, and I kind of do too. But could you see that being a possibility, or do you think the people that Pat Kraft has really already done his homework on and probably met with is the likely that we're going to go with?
It's hard for me to think that we're going to get another name thrown into the mix right now, but sometimes that's how these coaching searches work, right? That there's all this smoke around 4 or 5 names, and then in the 11th hour, someone pops up and they're the hire. So look, there could be someone in a job right now who, when Penn State's job opened, that they felt better about their situation, whether they felt like they were gonna be, promises were gonna be kept on their current university campus, and whether they felt like they had a better shot to build future championship contenders with NIL money in that, and maybe 4 weeks later or maybe 2 weeks down the road from here, they don't feel so good about that because of the sentiments they're getting from their university leadership. I think maybe the name that would be like that parallel, like, I don't know, you can call it parallel move or whatever, going from Notre Dame to LSU. I think maybe you look toward the current Notre Dame coach, right? I mean, Marcus Freeman is somebody that I think has long been pegged as, when he leaves South Bend, it's going to be either for an NFL head coaching job or he's going back to his alma mater at Ohio State. And as of now, I don't see a vacancy opening in Columbus anytime soon. I do think there could be some legitimate NFL interest for Marcus Freeman. And I also think part of this is, unless they're upset this weekend by Pitt, they stumble down the road, they also look like a very solid playoff team. In fact, they could be hosting a game in South Bend for the first round of the playoff. But that's somebody where I just wonder, because of the well-known academic requirements that are kind of in play at Notre Dame. There's been some conversation about, is Notre Dame going to continue to do this arms race at an elite level in terms of NIL funding? Are there some maybe angles you could play to try to build some leverage, trying to get Marcus Freeman out of there? It's curious to me. I don't think Penn State will be alone. I think he's really played this game well. Whenever he's asked about these jobs, he just kind of smiles and he says, I love it here at Notre Dame. It's humbling to have this interest from everybody else. It shows that we're doing things right here. But since you asked for a guy who's kind of already sitting in a pretty good spot, and maybe can you talk him into considering a move? He's probably the guy I would consider, but again, I don't think that's a likelihood. I don't want to tell people that I believe Marcus Freeman is, in that cluster of realistic opportunities right now, but I wouldn't necessarily rule that out.
All right, I love it, Tyler. I appreciate you giving us a rundown on the search. Let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about Penn State right now. starting to improve, offense and defensively. Everything's starting to make a little bit more sense. And we've heard from both sides. Terry Smith comes out and he says, he's asked, why are we able to successfully pass the ball down the field? And he says, well, now we're calling plays to do that.
Yeah.
You get some success on defense. I think really, even though Ohio State really turned it on at the end, that was just their wide receivers being better, but it looked like we were stopping their run game and, looked really good against Indiana. Came with a great plan to throw a lot of blitzes at Mendoza. And so it's like, okay, where was all that? And we're hearing that the defense has been simplified. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to ask, why did James Franklin not push to simplify the defense and tell Kotelnicki to pass the ball down the field? Are we overthinking this? Are we not looking enough into it? From your point of view, what went on? And now, how are you looking at this now?
First off, I've never really been down this street. There are some really nice houses on this street.
Oh yeah,
really nice houses.
There's some big ones here.
Maybe the next head coach can go shopping down that road. Wow, that's nice. Anyways, I think it was really refreshing to hear this from Terry Smith, because it kind of got some of us out of the loony bin, because we felt like we were going crazy with saying this stuff over and over. And I've been talking with you for a while about this. Like, if everyone, and including the head coach, is talking about how complicated the defense is, why aren't you doing something about that? Why are you rolling the same approach out week by week? And Terry Smith talked about, well, we simplified some things. Part of it is that guys are more comfortable in this. Part of it is we're simplifying some things. And he said in his press conference on Monday, when we were asking about this stuff, that he felt like it was back to the Penn State defense of old, and it was taking the form that he anticipated it would take. And I spoke with Zane Durant this week. I spoke with King Mack this week, and neither of them gave really specifics on what the simplification might have looked like for them personally or overall, but they both agreed that this was a unit that was able to play more aggressive, play more fast and reactive, and that's really what it's about on defense. You've got to go from your heels to your toes in a matter of a microsecond, and if you're thinking about it, you can't do that as effectively. And so I think it's a big deal. Terry Smith essentially said that it's, this is Jim Knowles' defense. He's the one who's kind of rolling out these simplifications. I don't know how much Terry had to go have a heart-to-heart with him or a face-to-face. Now with Andy Kotelnicki, that felt like it might have been a come-to-Jesus moment happen at some point. I don't know. I can't say that. But Terry Smith has been very adamant week by week by week, we got to get more vertical. He said it in the postgame after Iowa. He said we've got to get more vertical. He said it in the postgame after Ohio State. We've got to get more vertical. And he gave a one-sentence answer, as you referenced, to why did they get more vertical against Indiana? Because we called the plays to do that. And he talked about it on Monday a little bit more in depth, and said there was conversation at halftime where it was like, this is what we need to do. Like, this is how we have to attack downfield. And what did you see? Ethan Grunkemeyer had 5 pass completions that traveled 10 yards or more down the field. In his first 2 starts, he had 4 pass completions that traveled 10 yards or more down the field. What did you see? You saw an average depth per target from Penn State of 8.6 yards against Indiana. That was the highest of any Penn State quarterback in any of these Big Ten games. So you're talking about 3 with Drew Aller, who's a 30-plus game starter, a third-year starter, and a first-time starter in Ethan Grunkemeyer combined. That is the longest, the deepest that they have been throwing the ball. They were under 5 yards in depth on average against Ohio State. They were just over 6 yards on average against against Iowa. And so was it really that surprising that all of a sudden you saw the rushing game go for 88 yards in the fourth quarter after you got the ball rolling a little bit with your pass attack? They had like 29 yards rushing between the first and third quarters against the Big Ten's best run defense in Indiana. But you're connecting on some passes down the field. All of a sudden, the defense is to cover all 3 phases. What an interesting thought. And Nick Singleton, oh my gosh, wasn't that great to see? He goes 59 yards. His longest run of the season until then was only 16 yards. And so you'd love to think that Singleton has found something here to finish out his career on a high note. He's in a really good spot to finish above Saquon Barkley for most career touchdowns in an Indy Lions uniform. He's only 2 behind him. But how about Kobe Howard getting involved? 20-plus snaps. And we've been told repeatedly, Kotelnicki is the one who determines which wide receivers are out there on the field, which running backs we're seeing on the field. It's a coordinator decision. And the first couple games there where they weren't getting vertical, Kobe Howard was under 8 snaps in both of those games. He was over 20 snaps against Indiana. He had a couple catches. He has 3 straight games with 14-plus yard receptions, back-to-back with 20-plus yard receptions. And I thought it was really cool. Like, oh yeah, Trevor Pena is actually a talent. Like, remember what he did at Syracuse when he was one of the more impressive slot receivers in the country last year? About 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. He did not reach 20 receiving yards in any of the first 5 Big Ten games. None of them. He had 3 catches of 20-plus yards against Indiana. I mean, the switch went on, and they got results, and you just wonder, and we asked, in fact, my colleague John Sauber of the Center Daily Times followed up with Terry yesterday after practice and said, because Terry said one of his kind of assessments as a coach is, well, it took me 3 weeks to get the pass game vertical. And John asked, why was that the case? And he said, oh, it's a tough answer. It's not an easy one to get through. But he said he had to get more comfortable with what the offense was actually doing. He went from a guy who was a defensive coach who minded his own business, stayed in his lane, and it took him a few weeks, a few games to really get a feel for what's working, what's not, big picture for the offense, and it was an area of emphasis. And I think, to me, people are going to be like, oh, this is such a bad look for Andy Kotelnicki. I took that comment, and this is not what it was meant from Terry, because he's a big James Franklin fan, I believe. But I think that looks worse for James Franklin, because James Franklin was the CEO of this team. He wasn't in like his own lane in a different part of the program. Like, his job is to monitor game by game, finger on the pulse of what's working, what's not. And this was the pass attack for 6 games leading up to his dismissal. And to be honest, in a lot of ways, this was the pass attack that we saw with Drew Aller, the top-rated quarterback to come through here. And so I think it's kind of like, why wasn't this stuff checked like legitimately more early in the season? You had a bye week to work on it, and hindsight's 2020. But people, I'm not an X's and O guy. I'm not like you. I can't sit in front of film, dissect it coherently for everybody to understand or for myself to understand. That's not where my wheelhouse is. But I can tell you, I've watched a lot of football. I've been around a lot of football. I know what good, effective football looks like, and I think I know where ineffective football looks like. And the complicated defense and the lack of going vertical offense, I don't think you need a doctorate in football to understand, like, these are shortcomings for the program currently. And look what they were able to do against the number 2 team in the country. Had them on the brink.
I hope we can continue to build on it. I would love, I don't know, I mean, what's interesting, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I've said that I don't know if this team would want to go to a bowl game if you win the last 3, but I'm almost certain it's a thing that if there's not enough Big Ten teams, let's say we send 4 teams to the playoffs, and there's not enough 6-win teams, we can't opt out of a bowl game if there's no one else to take our spot, which would be really interesting. Because what's your timeline? Would you, if you were a betting man, would you say it's very likely that it's the weekend of Rutgers that we officially get a head coach named, or do you think it could be a little bit further on?
I think if they've got a guy and they've really come to an agreement, it's probably going to come from a national reporter, because it always does this stuff, but there will be some kind of leak that they're nearing something here with a certain guy. The name will be named, and I could see that happening maybe that Saturday, like leading up to kickoff against Rutgers. I think you're looking at maybe into that next week still where something's official. It's difficult. It depends on who they're targeting, and it depends on if they're willing to wait, like you said. But I think that is the most realistic timeline there, that coming off Thanksgiving weekend, by the time you're done with all your turkey leftovers and stuff, maybe there's an answer there. But I do think about, when you bring up the bowl, I think they've got a real chance to win the next 3. I feel a lot better about this Penn State squad than I did this time last week. Like, walking into Beaver Stadium last Saturday versus walking out of Beaver Stadium last Saturday, big difference in terms of where I thought this team's mentality was, in terms of where I thought the willingness to really fight for each other, and also the willingness for a coaching staff to adapt and make adjustments that can help this team feel better about itself. I think you just want this team to walk away with some pride, because right now these guys are in that spiral, and it's tough to hear from dudes like Nick Dawkins and Denai Dennis Sutton and Nick Singleton about these losses stacking up. Remember that 2022 class? They had never lost back-to-back games. They hadn't lost 2 games in a row. Now they've lost 6 games in a row. So I think it is a motivated group. Coming off the practice field yesterday, again, reinforced that sentiment from me. Like, these guys are bought in for the moment. They know that their large goals are off the tables, but 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, then all of a sudden you're 6-6. And yeah, I think what I've heard is the same as you, that your Big Ten obligations, is to play in a bowl game, unless for some reason, let's say Franklin got a job, or a bunch of guys hit the portal, or I don't know how that works. You hired somebody where it's a safety concern because you don't have the roster numbers to go out and field it. But wouldn't it be a pretty significant benefit if you did hire a head coach and he was able to come here and probably not be your head coach for a bowl game, but be around the facility, learn how some of these guys work, get a feel for how some of the younger guys practice. Maybe learn how some of his assistants go about their business, and you can really start to put a list together of who to keep and who not to keep, and try to approach it that way. I think it would be probably a good head start for the coach. Whether that happens and whether this team is up for a 13th matchup that's going to take 3 or 4 weeks down the road, we'll see. And I don't know if anyone is excited to go to like Detroit for the day after Christmas, but maybe you can play an ACC opponent in the Bronx in the Pinstripe Bowl, and that could be something interesting. But ultimately, I think we got to just see them win a game, right? We can't get too far ahead of ourselves. I've got them winning pretty convincingly against Michigan State, who's also riding a 6-game losing streak. But they're a few steps back because it's been really ugly. They have not been competitive. 5 of Penn State's losses have been determined by 17 total points. And Michigan State may be about to fire their head coach, so it's just a different environment. But I think they're gonna go blow some steam off this weekend, and then we'll see what it looks like when Nebraska comes to town, where you can maybe pick up a win against a team that's got 7 or 8 of them, and feel like we are building towards something better compared to where we were. And I give them a lot of credit because there's plenty of guys who are either going to be in the NFL next year, going to be doing something else other than football, or going to be on a different campus, and they're coming to grips with that. But if you can have some unifying presence here and get these guys, and Terry Smith's been great for that, I think getting to 6-6 should not be something that people sneeze at. It makes me a little sad, and I understand it, but some of the people like responding to my reporting last week about after the game about like this team showed up to fight. They made it a battle, and like so many people are like, who cares? No one gives a shit about the season anymore. We just care about the coaching search and which players are going to come in next year. Like, you only get 12 Saturdays a year to watch this team play. Don't you want to see them perform well, play well, win? You can't tank for anything. There's no draft pick to get to. So in my opinion, if you've been somebody who's like jaded about this team, I will tell you, talking to a bunch of players, coaches lately, they're hurting, but they're motivated in a way that I didn't really pick up on for probably the first 3 or 4 weeks after Franklin's firing. I think they were pretty broken in a lot of ways. And right now, I think that broken nature has turned into a bonding situation. And we'll see if that shows up on the field this Saturday.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully the boys get a win, and absolutely go State, man. Keep supporting them. Tyler, appreciate you coming on, man. As always, make sure you guys, I will have the link to 24/7's website down in the comments below, so make sure you guys click that, go subscribe, go check out all their content. Appreciate you as always coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you too. Keep up the good work, man.
Thank you so much.